Good evening, everyone, and welcome to everybody who's joined us this evening. We'll get started in a couple of minutes here, waiting for a couple of people to show up, and it's almost 7 o'clock, so we'll be on in a short period of time. We thank you, everyone who's joining us on Facebook Live as well, and we hope that you enjoy the presentation. We'll be back very shortly to get things started. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Bob Strasberg, and I am a member of the Christian Business Board. And on behalf of the entire board, I would like to welcome you to our event this evening. We're really grateful to have Senator Robert Ort with us this evening, and we're looking forward to a great conversation with him. The CBB exists to be able to help Christian businesses and Christian business professionals be successful at whatever it is they're trying to do, and in whatever role God has placed them in, to help them glorify and honor God in everything that they do. So we are just grateful that you're with us tonight. We hope you'll join us for future events, and some other people will tell you about upcoming events later on. But right now, I just would like to open us with a quick prayer, and then I'll introduce Senator Ortt. Father God, we're just grateful for the chance to be able to come before you this evening, to be able to share an important message. We thank you for bringing Senator Ortt to us, and we just ask that you help to orchestrate everything that we talk about tonight, that his message will just uplift and inform our audience, and that the recordings that people watch afterwards will just receive a groundswell of viewing, and that this message will help to bless and honor everyone who partakes of it, and that we'll just be able to discover how we can participate in the activities of our government, our state government, and beyond. And we just thank and praise you for the chance to have a voice in our government. We thank you for Senator Ortt and his persistence in being able to speak truth into our government, for his willingness to stand up and be a voice that speaks for honesty and just good government and things that aren't wasteful. And we just ask that you teach us tonight how we can help him, how we can stay informed, and how we can participate in our government in a way that will help to honor and glorify you. I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, tonight we are fortunate to have Senator Robert Ort with us. He is the New York State Senate Minority Leader. Before he went to the Senate, he was the mayor of my hometown, North Tonawanda, and we're just grateful to be able to open the mic up to him tonight. He's had a long career in a variety of different places. He started in business, and then he went into the military, served honorably in Afghanistan, and then went into public service in North Tonawanda first and now in Albany. So he will tell us much more about himself and his story. So I'm going to turn it over to him now. Thank you for being here, Senator Ortt.
Well, thank you for having me, Bob, and thank you to everybody who's part of this organization who opened up your doors, or I guess opened up your Zoom to me tonight. It's great to be with you and great to be able to get a chance to speak to like-minded people of faith, but also, New Yorkers who are concerned about, what's going on both here in our state, across our country. And I think it's okay to be concerned. I think sometimes, these are things that, especially when it comes to politics or things of governance, there's a tendency, especially today, where you don't always feel comfortable raising these issues, right? Because you don't know what kind of crowd you're in, and it can be very polarizing, and people get very emotional or very vitriolic. And certainly today, a lot of this dialogue happens on platforms where it's also very easy to attack one another instead of trying to understand each other or have a good conversation. So this is far better than that. It's a better forum, and I appreciate the fact that you're all here to really to ask questions of me. That's really why I look forward to this. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and trying to provide answers. I think that always works best than just me sort of pontificating. But real quick, I'll just do a little introduction. Bob sort of hit all the high notes. I grew up in North Tonawanda. My mom and dad still live there. My sister lives in Niagara County as well with her 2 children and her husband. My wife and I, Megan, live in North Tonawanda. So like Bob will tell you, we never really moved too far from North Tonawanda when you're from North Tonawanda. So we sort of adhered to that philosophy. But I grew up attending Evangel Assemblies of God, which used to be over on Maple Road in Amherst. And we were there for much of when I was younger. Went to a church on Walnut Street in Niagara Falls as well when I was real little. And then my parents and my sister attend the chapel, and my wife and I attend a Lutheran church in North Tonawanda. That was her church, and I sort of was adopted into that church family. But so grew up in, sometimes going to church twice on Sundays. There was a morning service and an evening service. So that was sort of really a big part of my upbringing. Thank you to my parents. Graduated, went to North Tonawanda Public Schools, graduated from St. Joe's, went to Canisius College, graduated from Canisius. And as Bob said, went into, after graduating from college, went into financial advising and financial services, which for me was a great experience. I did not come from a family that knew a whole lot about the stock market or about financial, knowledge. What all I knew is we didn't have a whole lot of money. That was about the extent of the knowledge that I had. So it was a great eye-opening experience for me, both individually to learn about, smart ways, sort of change the way I approached money. That's sort of an ongoing journey, as I think it probably is for a lot of us, but it was very important for me. And we focused on middle income families and trying to provide, financial security, financial independence for people like my mom and dad, and families like a lot of my friends' families. And so I had my Series 6 and 63, my insurance broker's license, and did that for several years. As Bob mentioned, I was also in the military. I was in the New York Army National Guard. I was motivated to do that after 9/11, which of course, 20 years ago, just about a week ago. But it was right out of college. I watched 9/11 happen like a lot of you did. And that was really the first, I think that was sort of a cathartic moment for me where I was a kid, but started to have to make decisions as an adult. I joined the military, went to boot camp, went to AIT, came home, ultimately got my commission, went down to Fort Benning, Fort Knox, and spent 8 years, and then met my wife, or got engaged to my wife. I'm trying to remember the timeline. It gets a little fuzzy as you get older. Met my wife. We were dating. We got engaged. I deployed to Afghanistan in 2008 and returned, fortunately, and ran for mayor of North Tonawanda, got married, and bought a house, all within about 9 months of each other. And I would not advise anyone to do that, but it was God's plan for me, and it worked out. I was the mayor for 5 years. I'm still married, and we still live in that house. And so everything kind of worked out the way it was supposed to, I suppose. And I was mayor for 5 years. I would tell you, anyone, being mayor of your hometown has got to be one of the coolest experiences for me. And I was pretty young. I was 30 when I was elected as mayor. And so sometimes I think I was too young to maybe really appreciate it until sort of towards the end. And since I have no longer have been at City Hall, I've come to appreciate it a little bit more. And I guess maybe that's just how things are in life. Sometimes you appreciate them more when you're not in it, when you're not right there up close to it. And for me, going to City Hall every day, obviously that was my job. And I did the best I could and really tried to make a positive difference in North Tonawanda, where I live, where I grew up. And I think we did that. I'm very proud of a lot of things that occurred during my 5 years in City Hall. It was a great experience. Like I said, I think it was maybe the best experience next to leading young men in combat for me. And then unexpectedly, I was asked to run for the state Senate, and prayed about it, asked my wife about it, and decided to do it. And I've been in the Senate since 2015. I was elected in 2014, and I've served in Albany since 2015 as a state senator from the 62nd district. That includes Orleans, Niagara, and a little piece of Monroe County. So I actually go all the way to Brockport. For those that sort of know that, the college, that's sort of the eastern edge of my district. And then I basically go all along the lake, and obviously have all of Niagara and Orleans counties. And then last year, in July of 2020, I was elected by my colleagues to serve as the Senate Republican leader in the state Senate. So not unlike Washington, each party has a conference within the body. So there's obviously Democrats and Republicans in the state Senate. There are 43 Democrats. There are 20 Republicans. Each of those conferences elects a leader to sort of lead and speak for their conference. And I was elected in July of 20 to serve as the conference leader for the Republican conference in the state Senate, which is another fantastic honor and a blessing for me, to be elected by really your colleagues, your peers. There are 19 other state senators who decide that they want you to speak for them, and especially at a time when as a Republican in New York State, it is not always easy. But I think it's also, I tend to like challenges. I tend to seek out challenges. There's an old saying, certainly I'm sure there's a good saying that I am not remembering right now from scripture, but I remember Warren Buffett had a great saying. He said, when others are fearful, be greedy. And when others are greedy, be fearful. And I've always tried to, fall back on that. I think, when others are running away from something, running away from danger, that's where I think leaders, and that's when we need good people to run towards that. When everyone's running towards something, they all want to be part. That's probably a good time to maybe step back and maybe sort of double check yourself a little bit. So I've sort of tried to adhere to that whenever I can. But again, I've been lucky. I've led a great life, very blessed, and very appreciative to be able to do what I do and to be able to have the platform that I have to speak to issues that are important to me, that are hopefully important to all of you, but also to try to impact that conversation. And it's not always easy, but to be part, you can't have an impact if you're not in the arena. You can't have an impact on the conversation if you're not part of the conversation. So I try to remind myself of that, some days it seems like you're banging your head against the wall. And you always want to believe that you're making a difference, and whether you're a police officer or a teacher or a nurse, and no doubt, or a soldier, and no doubt there's days where all of those folks probably wake up and wonder, was it all for something? Did it all amount to something? Did it make a difference in someone's life? And you go through your ups and downs with that, but I really do believe that you have to get up every day. You have to be part of that conversation, just like all of you do, whether it's as faith leaders, as business leaders, or even in this kind of forum, you have to be willing to be a part of it, even when it seems hard or difficult. Because if you're not, then we know what the result is, right? And so that's that's what I've been doing the last since I got in the Senate, but certainly the last year and a half or so, leading our conference. I travel all over the state. New York City. I'll be in New York City on Thursday. I'll be in I'm not even sure where the Sagamore hotel, but it's a really nice hotel. I've never been to it, but I'll be there tomorrow night. There's the Business Council of New York is having a big reception, their biggest reception of the year. So I'll be down there, and then I'll be in the city on Thursday, and then I'll be home Thursday night. So a lot of time away from home. The new role. I have a very understanding wife, which is always helpful. Understanding spouse, which is always helpful, and she's always been very supportive of me, and that's kind of how I get to do what I get to do. Because without her, none of it would be possible. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. We still live in Niagara County. I like to think that I'm still the same, the same guy that I've always been. And I try to use all my experiences, and bring those to bear when I'm doing this job and when I'm in Albany and representing all of you. And I try to do that to the best of my ability. No doubt I fall short sometimes, but I keep trying, keep punching away, as they say. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions either about me or about specific issues. There's any number of issues. So I'd rather than me sort of bring up one or two of them, might be easier to hear about the issues that are important to all of you, and then maybe I can try to address those.
Well, Senator Ort, I can tell you I've followed your career since you entered into politics in North Tonawanda, and I can say that from my perspective, you've made a tremendous difference both in my hometown and in New York State, just because you have a voice that speaks truth. You speak out when you see something wrong. You champion causes that other people probably wouldn't stand up for because it's the right thing to do, even though it may not be the popular thing to do. So we thank you for that. Of course, as a faith-based group, we are always interested in how faith plays a role in everything that you do, whether in business, in your military service, or in your political life. Can you share any insights into how God has moved in your life during any of those phases of your working career?
Well, I mean, it's almost hard to miss it for me. The areas that he has played a significant role in what I do. I think it's starting that a lot of it sort of broke. None of it was. I think especially in politics, but I think we all like to think when we're starting out that we're gonna orchestrate, right? What's going to happen? I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to achieve this, and then you find out as you get along in life that that's not really how it goes. That things occur, right? You might be in the right position, or you may have been put in that right position, but there's a lot of events that are outside of our control, good and bad. And I've been blessed that as those events have occurred, I've always been in a position where I can make a difference, or in a position where it's been impactful. So I'll use the example, when I was in the military, certainly, post 9/11, for me, that was a calling. I mean, I never doubted, never once thought twice about joining the military after that. I went on my computer, reached out to 3 recruiters, Marine Corps, Air Force, Army. Army called me back first. I was in the Army. I mean, that was, for me, it was just about serving. And that took me on a whole path. I met some great folks. There are a lot of times in the Army when you can feel alone. And so, you pray a lot. And I can tell you, when I was in the U.S. military, there's a lot of folks that are in the Army that come to the Army with a strong belief in God. And so I always felt comfort in that. Even though sometimes, being in boot camp, when your face is in the mud and you're doing push-ups and you have somebody screaming at you, it doesn't always feel like, it doesn't feel calming or relaxing. But God was there. And I think about my time in Afghanistan, the fact that I came home. I mean, I can tell you there were several moments where it could have gone the other way. And that's not to be dramatic. That's just combat. Combat is, there's a lot of folks that come home from combat, and there's folks that don't. And the folks that do very often are they were lucky. They were, that wasn't their time. God decided that they had more of their life to go. And I had soldiers that was their time, and God did call them home. I had 4 soldiers who were killed in action. And like I said, it could have easily been me. And I wouldn't be here with you today. But I am. And I never lose sight of that. I can tell you that much. And then coming back home, getting married to my wife, us getting a house, serving as mayor. I mean, I ran for mayor. There was no guarantee that I would win. I was a 30-year-old kid, really, for all intents and purposes, up against someone who had owned a bar a long time in the city, who was well known. He was the mayor. Bob's laughing, but owning a bar, you get to meet a lot of people when you own a bar, and that can always be a good or bad thing. But there was nothing about that run. Today, I always say I'm a big biography reader, and when you look back on things afterward, when you're reading the biographies, right, it always seems like a linear thing, like, oh, well, yeah, this is what happened. But at the time, you don't know how these things are going to go. And so I had no doubt support from my family, but again, a lot of support and blessings from the Lord. That was my new mission. I became the mayor, served as mayor for 5 years, and really had a great 5 years. I mean, really, 5 years. Yes, there were tough days, of course, in the job, but for the most part, it was 5 years without vitriol. It was a good spirit of cooperative, working together with the council, myself, city hall staff, government staff across the city, and we got a lot of good stuff done. And I think that was borne out. And then running for the state senate, again, that was not my plan at all at that time. And some days I remind myself there was a reason why it wasn't in my plan. But nonetheless, that was God's plan. And my predecessor had been there for a long time. Nobody would have predicted he was not going to run again. He didn't. I did. And again, nothing about that would have been preordained, but I won. And I will tell you that in my time in Albany is not unlike Washington, D.C., that it is a tough place. It is not city halls can be tough places, town halls can be tough places, county halls can be tough places. But Albany, as we all know, anyone that's ever done any sort of reading, or Albany is a tough place politically. It is not beanbag. I mean, it is, if it's not the big leagues, it is definitely a step below. And the hits are harder. You got New York City, you got a lot of money because of that in the political arena. You have some tough brass knuckle players. And I've had my own comeuppances with some of these individuals, some really nasty folks. And it makes you question yourself at times. You want to do good things, but it's easy to say, I want to do good things when no one's coming at you. But when people are coming at you, trying to stop you, attacking you, when you have to face someone down to do it, that's when you sort of find your inner steel. And I've always known that's sort of when I think Rob Ort kind of does his best work, to be very blunt. But through those ups and downs in Albany and in my career there is no question God has been with me and helped me navigate those and pick me up when I fell down. And I'm the better for it now. I'm the better for it today because of all those experiences. But I never lose sight that, but for the grace of God, I wouldn't be here. So I guess that's me a long-winded answer to your question.
Thank you. I did neglect to mention in my introduction that we're going to take questions at the end of Senator Ortt from anybody. I'd appreciate it if you could post those questions up in chat as we go through, and I will look at those when we get nearer to the end. But certainly if there's some question that is pertinent to what we're talking about, I'll be happy to put that on the table at any point in this time. So please feel free to post something in chat, and we'll see if we can get you an answer from Senator Ortt when we're at the end of our session here. Of course, one of the issues that we're constantly struggling with as Christians in the workplace is the need sometimes to moderate our faith, to stifle our faith because of government regulations, because of fear of reprisals. So we are trying to figure out and how we can go to folks such as yourself. Obviously, you're walking the tightrope along with us in terms of being able to live by faith, yet try to abide by the authorities that exist over us, and also make sure that we're not going to be dragged into a lawsuit, although some of us probably would welcome a challenge or two like that if it will forward God's kingdom purposes. How can we as business people, Christian business people, navigate the anti-faith-based bias that exists in New York State? Do you have any thoughts or wisdom that might help us?
I mean, I don't know that I have, like the one thing, if you do this, this is the best, right? I think we all understand, or at least everyone on this call probably understands all too well, the challenges that people of faith, but I think specifically, and I, look at, I will tell you, I grew up as obviously Christian. I am a Christian, but I will tell you, I've always supported, really, for the most, to my knowledge, I've always supported anybody's ability to practice their faith with God as they see fit. I think that's one of the real principles of our country, was the idea that we were trying to found a country where you could worship God in your way, free from government regulation. Sort of ironic that here we are a couple centuries later, sort of talking about this again. But I think for the purposes of this call, I think it's important to note for me that really the discrimination is not against all faiths, but predominantly against Judeo-Christian faiths, right? That is where sort of at least that I see, that is really where the government sanctioned restrictions come into play. And I think that's concerning for me, because if it was against all faiths, that would still be concerning, but at least that's sort of a different way to tackle that, right? But when they sort of pick, and I think a lot of that goes into a lot of reasons, but politically speaking, I think it dovetails with a lot of other, the Judeo-Christian religion is what the country was founded on. And our founding fathers and early, Americans, that is the faith that they practiced. And today, anything associated with the founding of America, to some, is viewed as inherently evil or inherently bad or inherently misguided. Now, I'm not saying this, but my colleagues across the political spectrum, some of them believe this. They would sort of scratch their head and think that a group of business leaders, Christian business leaders, they would sort of find that to be, sort of a curiosity to them, because we increasingly live in a secular world, and government has taken on really the role of religion. Government wants you to believe, today's government, many of the people, they want to be your religion, right? If you need help, come to government. Government is setting themselves up as the solution to all of the ills. And you need to look no further than the pandemic and the responses by New York State, as well as the federal government to some extent now, but the New York State during the pandemic, Governor Cuomo set himself up as, he was the ultimate de facto decider during the pandemic. And I think that fits with more of a left-leaning philosophy of that government is the answer, not God, not, don't look to yourself, don't look even to your family. It's the government. We will supplant. I grew up at a time when it was family, God, that my family and obviously we were people of faith. That was where we derived a lot of our strength, our wisdom. That's where we went. My parents they probably never called their congressman. I don't think they voted, but I don't think they ever looked to the government to solve something for them. But increasingly today, that is where I think people are. And I think, it's just, as people of faith, you're going to have to act according to your conscience. You ultimately, I can't tell you what to do, because some people are true Christians, but they are going to, I'm not a confrontational person. I'm not comfortable with this. So I'm going to withdraw from this engagement and attack this a different way, because not everyone is cut out the same way. Other people, they're fighters. Again, they can be Christians, but you're more driven to tackle something head on. And if someone tells you can't do something, you're going to do it. You're going to still try to do it. So I don't know that there, unfortunately, is a just do this. And I certainly can't tell you to do something as business owners that might result in a lawsuit. I'm not going to do that, because that's not my money. It's not my license or my property or whatever on the line. So as an elected official, I have to be very careful about advocating a course of action that could result in legal action against you. I always tell folks, look, you have to do what you think is right. There's laws out there. There's attorneys out there. There's people out there. If it was me, I know what I would do. But at the end of the day, for a lot of folks, that is why you have elected leaders. You have elected leaders so they can go fight certain battles so that you don't have to, so that you can worry about providing the service you provide, putting your kids through school. Now, sometimes these things, that means you got to live with certain things at the moment you don't want to, but you have to know that there's a larger battle coming or going on, and you have to pray and have faith that that will have an outcome that is favorable, or that is an outcome that we're looking for. So, I don't know if that helps at all, but that's probably the best I can say to you here without a specific sort of a more specific issue.
Are there specific resources that we can turn to as business people, regardless of whether we're trying to operate on a faith-based business, as a faith-based business, or, as a secular business, if we have issues with the government in some way, what's the best way to approach trying to get that resolved? How, obviously, we have elected officials.
Right.
You have always been pretty open, as far as I can tell, about talking to people and wanting to help them. So, but again, you're sort of walking the tightrope around not wanting to seem biased in one direction or the other.
Well, I probably fell off that tightrope a long time ago. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't pretend, obviously I always tell people I represent everybody. So if a constituent calls my office with an issue, I don't ask them, what are you registered as? Or, we try to help whoever we can help if they have an issue, a governmental issue. Politically, I don't shy away from where I am. People know where I stand. And, if one day they don't return me to office, they don't return me to office. So I don't know that I walk a tightrope. I actually feel pretty free. Obviously, legally, I got to be careful sometimes in how to advise a business if there's a legal consequence. But politically, Bob, I can say with almost whatever I want to say as an elected official. I think people know where I stand generally on a lot of issues. I'm not an independent. I mean, I try to be an independent thinker on a number of issues, but let's be honest, I have a political bent on a number of issues, and normally I'm going to fall on a conservative viewpoint with a number of issues. Not necessarily everyone. Sometimes I surprise folks in different ways, but I try to look at it, independently as much as I can. But I guess my point is, if you're calling, if you have an issue, you have elected leaders like myself. We have staffs. It's not just Rob Ort with a phone. I mean, I have a staff that works for you, that is paid by the public. They're there to answer questions, to find out about a bill, to look into how to put you in touch with different agencies that might be able to help you. You're certainly able to call the agencies yourself. So for instance, the Department of Labor, the DEC, the SLA, the DOT, you can call any of those agencies yourself, but you can also go through myself, your assemblyman's office, your congressman's office. A lot of folks, believe it or not, a lot of the folks that call our offices, they're really not looking for an answer to a problem. They're looking to voice their opinion. Okay, which is fine, by the way. But that's a different kind of phone call. When we get a call from somebody that really has, this is the issue I have, can you help me? That's why you have elected leaders, in my view. Now I will tell you, sometimes we get calls from people and we can't help them. It isn't that we don't want to, but what they're looking for is not wholly within my power to deliver. And that's probably the hardest thing, I think, sometimes to explain to folks is, democracy is really great, except when it doesn't work for you. Meaning, in New York State right now, there's 43 Democrats in the state Senate, and there's 106 Democrats in the state Assembly. And we have a Democratic governor. So if you are somebody who is center right, and you would like some center right piece of legislation passed, or you would like some mandate repealed, I can support those things, but I can't of myself make those happen, because it requires me to get a certain number of votes just in the Senate. I have no control what happens in the Assembly, right? Because that's a whole different house. Now we work those things and sometimes but those things can take months, if not years. And increasingly we're operating in a time frame where I feel like things are happening so fast with real impacts on people's lives. You look at kids going back to school with the mask mandate, the vaccine mandate. You look at, no religious exemption. You look at, a number of mandates that happened when Cuomo was in office. It was very difficult because many of those things I disagreed with, and yet I could not of my own undo them or change them. And that's sometimes a hard conversation to have with a constituent, because you agree with them, but nothing is going to change in the short term. And that's sort of a challenging realization to come to.
Well, thank you. And I see that Alex has posted his email in the chat. So for anyone who does want to reach out to Senator Ortt's office with an issue, you've got some contact information. Of course, you can search him on the web, and you can follow him on Twitter, which I do right. Mentioned the the fact that you are outnumbered in the Senate and in the House. But as I look at the map in the Senate of Western and Central New York, it looks like the vast majority of those senators are Republican conservatives. Is there any effort to work? I'm sure you work jointly with all of those folks on political issues. Is there any discussion of faith-based issues? Do you pray together? Is there?
Yeah. I mean, there's a prayer group in Albany. It's open obviously to anybody, and there's a number of Democrats who go. I've gone. It's every Tuesday morning. Actually, for a time it was a pastor from my district out in Monroe County, and we would get together. There'd be a scripture reading. We would talk about some things and pray together. Now over the last year, because of the pandemic, we didn't have that, because the pastor the Capitol was closed to the public. So, I would say, really the last 2 years, if you go back to 20, because it was March, so our session was only 2.5 months in before it really got kind of washed away. So the last year and a half has not, like so many things, it has reduced the amount of time I think Republicans and Democrats, or even leaders from different parts of the state, could be together physically. It really has had an impact, which I hadn't totally even thought about actually until you asked that question. But it has made it harder. Now, don't get me wrong, you're still in a polarized political environment where it already is difficult. Now you add in the pandemic, and I think it makes it even harder, or has made it harder, to sort of bridge that divide sometimes. But there are, I had lunch today with a Democratic state senator, a colleague of mine, Senator Kennedy. He graduated from St. Joe's 4 years ahead of me, as I like to remind him. And but we've always tried to keep a dialogue open. We're not going to, that doesn't change, how I feel or how he feels, but it allows us to have that dialogue. And I think that dialogue is important, especially when you're talking about certain issues. But at the end of the day, I think the problem is, it's really a problem of math at this juncture. It's math and geography, which are two things that are unforgiving, because it's not a debatable point. Geography is what it is. Math is what it is. There are more legislators from Albany South than there are Albany North. And most of those legislators, not all, but many of them, the vast majority. Some of them go to that prayer meeting, by the way, but the vast majority do not necessarily bring into their public discourse matters of faith, right? So that they're at the prayer breakfast, but they are unabashedly pro-choice. They are at the Bible study, but they are for the vaccine with no religious exemptions. So my point is, they may consider themselves people of faith and Christians or what have you, but in their voting record, in the political dialogue, there is no reflection of that. And I don't know what to tell you with that, because I just don't know what to tell you. I don't know how. To me, I don't want to be cynical, but to me, it's almost like it's a given. I mean, look at there is a growing secular movement heavily on the left that would scoff at the notion of doing anything that could be identified with the quote unquote religious right? So, or just conservative ideals in general. So the fact that it's conservative and might be a Christian ideal to us might be seen as simply coincidence. To them, it would not be seen that way. They would see it as not a matter of faith, but it's a political thing. So there is no room in the Democratic Party today. There is no room for being a person who supports life. If you support the life of the unborn child, you have no future as a political elected official. You could be a Democrat as a citizen, but you cannot, no matter what anyone on this call thinks, I'm just telling you, it is a fact, undeniable. You cannot be a Democratic elected official with any future whatsoever if you are pro-life. You will have a primary, you will lose that primary, and then you'll be gone. That is how it will go. And I've just seen it. I've seen it happen since I've been there. Quite frankly, I mean, we've even moved well beyond those issues to other issues where even liberal Democrats are having a hard time surviving because they're getting primaried by Democratic Socialists of America and things of that nature. So it is the Democratic Party. It's probably difficult, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, so please don't take it as such. But it is difficult, I suspect, for people on this call. We all know, I would like to think we all know people who we disagree with. You might know people on the left side of the political spectrum. But if they live in Buffalo or West Seneca or North Tonawanda, they simply are not the same as the folks who are from Brooklyn and Manhattan and the Bronx. It's just not. The political DNA down there is very different. The Democratic Party down there is changing rapidly. And it is very, in my view, it is very anti-Christian, anti-faith, anti-individual liberty, in some regards, I would term it anti-American. Now, that's my own editorializing comment there, but that is how I feel. The America that I've always identified is something that they not only identify with, but they would actually say is bad. And so, yes, do I work with Democrats? Yes, where I can. Do I work with legislators from Syracuse, from Rochester? I do. But is that enough to swing it around? It has not been. And at this point, the numbers are simply not there. So I don't quit. I don't want anyone to think that I'm not doing it. It's just, it takes more. There's not some secret door that I just haven't found. It is an increasingly difficult task to try and get somebody from Brooklyn to agree with, I could get them to support, maybe I'm going to rename a highway for Bob Strasberg. Bob Strasberg, community member. We're going to name the bridge after you. Sure. But if I said I want to push forward a bill that undoes the Reproductive Health Act, which is essentially late-term abortion. If I said we're going to do a bill, I would not find one Democrat, not one, that would put their name on that bill, because the political consequences for them would be too great.
Well, I think we all recognize the divide that exists in our state and the power of the left-leaning political machine in this particular location, mostly downstate, but we've seen it also appear here in Western New York. I guess what we would encourage you is to stay connected to the people who are like-minded to you. You have colleagues, I'm guessing, that are strong people of faith. And we've always operated by the principle that a three-strand cord is not easily broken. There's a Bible passage that speaks to that exactly. So having people who are like-minded and support you is extremely important. We would encourage you and ask you, how can we help to, encourage those kinds of relationships between you and your colleagues? And we also believe strongly in the power of God to work miracles. So we encourage you in that way as well, that sometimes God will show up in ways that you can't possibly imagine. So
I certainly, and on that note, I mean, and I don't want to be, but yes, that is, we need that now to some level, him to work his power, because it is just where the state is right now. It's in a very precarious spot. New York State is not, and again, it's not like Ohio, it's not like Florida, or it's a different place, and partly because when you have a city of 8 million people that's recognized as a global city, it's not just the biggest city in New York, it's the biggest city in the country. That makes it unique, and that makes, that drives a lot of our political discourse and a lot of things that you see. And I believe we're living in a very challenging time where what used to be viewed as, and I know there's scripture about this, where, the evildoers will be viewed as good, and the good will be viewed as evildoers. And it's an inversion of what we know to be true. And I think you're seeing some of that right now. I think, you're seeing, those who we know to be good people and emissaries of the good are held up as villains. And those who we know have transgressed and done things that are wrong are held up as victims or heroes. And that is happening. I mean, that is happening. It happens almost daily in our state capital. And so we need prayer. And we need people who are able both to be strong in their convictions, but at the same time, that are willing to sit down with other people, as I said, other legislators, other elected leaders, and try to say, look, we all have a responsibility here, though, to govern, and to govern justly on behalf of everybody, and not just govern for, the percentage of people who supported Rob Ort. And so I think that's always that's always a challenge, certainly politically, and we live in a highly polarized time. But make no mistake, I mean, there are still things as business leaders, there are day-to-day business challenges you all face in New York, aside from being people of faith. That the fact that you are people of faith is outstanding. But you can also call my office, or there are things that we can still affect. When I say it's an uphill battle, I'm talking the big things, the big picture things that I would like to see happen. Those are right now very challenging to do. But there are smaller things. I say smaller meaning in the context of the larger political discourse, but they might be really significant to Bob or Linda or Deborah, right? They might be really important to your business, even though they might seem small in the context of the overall political dialogue that we're having all across the state and the country. So there are still a number of ways to achieve good things on behalf of my constituents like yourself. And I think there's ways to do the Lord's work, maybe in ways that we don't always see, though. Maybe there's, in those little ways, or in chipping away and trying to be, trying to be a voice for people that feel like they don't have one.
You alluded to to Governor Cuomo before, and of course, we've all watched his downfall. He had a very abrasive personality and ran roughshod over virtually anybody that got in front of him. Now we have Kathy Hochul in place, a Western New York native. How would you describe your relationship with Governor Hochul, and what kinds of things do you expect will happen with her, especially since she's headed into an election year?
Well, so first, my relationship has actually been pretty good with the governor. I know her obviously better than I did, Andrew Cuomo. She's from Western New York. She was my member of Congress when she represented North Tonawanda in the U.S. House. I was the mayor. She came to City Hall on a couple of occasions, and obviously as lieutenant governor, I've gotten to know her and see her at events in Western New York a lot. And so we have I would term a pretty decent working relationship. We're friendly, we're civil. And that's a good thing. And I think it's also good because for me, it's one thing to disagree with someone. It's another thing to be able to disagree and still have a dialogue. And that's what I would like to have. With Governor Cuomo, that was really impossible because he was not somebody you weren't going to be able to disagree with him and have a dialogue, at least not a healthy dialogue. And so, I think with her, you will be able to do that, or I will be able to. And that can be good both for my conference, but also for my district. She also knows my district. When she was in Congress, she represented Niagara, Orleans, the Genesee, the Glow region. So if I talk to her about a project or an issue in Holly, New York, she's going to know where Holly, New York is. I mean, she's been there, or, North Tonawanda, or, Wheatfield. She knows these places because she's been there. Whereas, when you're talking to Governor Cuomo, he knew sort of where it was on the map, but he had never been to these places. I don't think he was ever in my district except for Wilson and Niagara Falls. That was, that was it. And so, those are all good things for Western New York. It's a good thing for me. As far as what I expect, here's, it's a mix of rain and it's a mix of sun and clouds. The clouds are, she's going into a election year when she will almost certainly have a primary. So you're going to get a Democratic primary, which means she is going to have to run to the left because that's who votes in primaries, more progressive voters. And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but that's what she's going to do. You're already seeing it. So I believe that the Kathy Hochul that we would have known from Congress will vanish, politically speaking, and she will become a much more left-leaning progressive governor. I think from a policy standpoint, you will not see a major difference. You might actually even see more of a leftward shift because she's going to need the legislative leaders more than Cuomo did. Cuomo didn't need Carl Hastie until the very end, but for the most part, he didn't need him, right? He had his own following in New York City. He had his own following across the state of New York. Kathy Hochul is not known down in New York City. And you can bet if she has a primary, that primary opponent will be from New York City and will be a progressive person. And so she's going to try to outflank that person with the belief that in New York, once you have the Democratic nomination, you don't really have to worry about coming back to the middle. Now, there's a lot of things going on right now that I think could change that. We know about crime. Crime is a real problem across the state. You talk about the economy and bringing small business back after the pandemic. No one's going to shop in a city they don't feel safe in. No one's going to open up a business if they can't keep their employees safe, if they can find employees. Right? It's already hard enough to find them, let alone if they have the added bonus of maybe getting robbed or shot or whatever. And I look at Niagara Falls as sort of an example of that. But New York City, Buffalo, violent crimes are happening there, and there's a significant increase in that. And that's a direct result of things that have occurred and come out of Albany. So I think that's got people maybe looking at their options. You obviously have the pandemic. you have some of these mandates. You have a state that obviously has significant regulations and cost of living here, even if you're not a business owner. So I think there are a lot of things that could give a Republican a credible chance of winning the governorship next year. But everything's got to line up just right. Everything, the Republican candidate has to do everything right. And some things that are out of their control have to line up for them to succeed in a state like New York. And that can happen, but there's a long road to go for that to occur. But I really think that would be, nothing short of a miracle. And that would be a big deal to capture the governor's seat. But I think, again, I think Kathy Hochul, I get along with her. I wished her well. I talked to her when she was, I guess when she became governor. And she's a hard worker. She's a savvy political person. No one's going to outwork her. She'll go everywhere, all over the state. But she may not even make the nomination. She may not even win the primary. So she may get to June. If she loses the primary, then it's going to be it's going to be yet another person coming in. So there's a lot of twists and turns that governor's race could take before we sort of have some clarity on who it's going to be.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom tonight. We are just about at the end of our time for your presentation, but we'd certainly like to move on. And I'm going to let Linda Penn kind of lead us into the Q&A session.
Thank you, Senator Robert Ort, so much for being with us, spending the time with us, and giving this more understanding. There is a movement and people that are concerned in this area, and they are rising up. We are seeing many movements and meetings. And so your information is very important to us, because I can tell from your testimony that you care about people, you care what is right, and you care for America, and you care for what it represents here in the state of New York, even if we have a little bit of a political pushback. But greater is he that's in us than is in the world. My name is Linda Penn, and I am from WDCX radio program Today's Living Hope. And as you're thinking about your questions, please go to the bottom of this Zoom, and where it says chat, click on that and ask your questions, and we will direct those right to Robert as we kind of conclude our time together. But there's two things I really want to remind you of. Go to christianbusinessboard.com and look at our website. If you want more information, you can email us at info@christianbusinessboard.com. A very important meeting is happening on October the 16th. That's a Saturday. And it's from 9 to 12, and it's about you, the business owner, man or woman, family or professional. And it will be from 9 to 12 at the Well at 995 Dodge Road in Gettsville. This is because we care and want to communicate with you. We will have people there who can also add to your concerns, our community outreach, and we're going to have some legal people there, some media people there, some people who are as concerned as you are about your business. And we definitely want to hear from you, and I know you're going to want to hear from someone else. As I'm telling you this, begin to write those questions down in that chat so we can answer them for you. Also, our next first Facebook Live will be October the 18th, Monday night from 7 to 8, and we will have another important business topic just for you. We're also wanting to find resources for you, and we have many that we can offer. Now, as you finish those questions, we're going to Bob's going to ask those, and Robert is going to answer those. And thank you again so much, Robert Ort. We are praying for you. Know that there's Christians, that we care what you do. We care that you're on the front lines. And thank you for being with us tonight. Now we will take those questions.
Well, the first question is, how are the Christian lobbyists functioning in Albany these days?
Well, so not dissimilar in some ways from other lobbyists, meaning the last year was tough because lobbyists were not allowed into the Capitol. So you had to do everything by Zoom, which, we was done, but it's different. I will tell you, as a legislator, it's just a different, it's just a lot different when you're doing it this way than when you're able to sit down with somebody, or grab them in the hallway or go into their office or whatever it might be. So, but I think, I think the challenge for the Christian lobbyists, at least the ones that I've dealt with, I don't know how much traction they are able to get with the Democrats. And I say that because at the end of the day, you have to get with some of the Democrats, right? Because they're the ones who are holding all the cards governmentally. So they're the ones making policy right now. And so just going to the Republicans, it might make you feel good, but you can't just do that. And I think some of the Christian lobbyists, when the Republicans had the state Senate up until the end of 2018, that was sort of their bulwark. They would go to the Republicans in the Senate, and if they could get something stopped or whatever, then they were like, okay, my job's done. But in all those years, they did not foster relationships with any Democrats. So when the Republicans lost the state Senate, in 2019 or 2018, but 2019, we lost it. And then a number of my colleagues in the Senate on the Republican side, they've left. So, so those individuals that those lobbyists had relationships with are gone, even within our own ranks. So I just think there's been a lot of change in Albany, and that change, that tumult has probably not been great for some of the Christian lobbyists. And I think that's going to require them to, it's like anything in life. It's a people business, right? It's a relationship business, and you have to have relationships, and those relationships, if you really care and you're meeting people for the right reasons and trying to do the right thing, you'll attract other people. And as my boss used to say in sales, it's not who you know, it's who you get to know. And that's sort of probably a good philosophy for a lot of lobbyists out there. But I think the Christian lobbyists, I don't think they're there. There's some that are present, but I think they're sort of struggling between COVID and just the change in the political climate in Albany, I think has been challenging for a number of them.
Well, that's another voice that we would like to encourage, of course, and we need to find a way to reach out to them as well and be able to include them in our conversations and see how we can, lift them up when they need lifting as well. There's another question here that just asks, what is the biggest issue before our legislative assembly that we can pray for right now? What on your mind needs some sort of prayer intervention?
Man, I wish there was only one. I say that in all seriousness, but I'll give you maybe a couple. So certainly I think our new governor, regardless of where we are politically, that is a big job. That is a tough job to go into. She's going to have people coming out of the woodwork to attack her from all sides. We're still in the middle of COVID. We have a struggling economy. It's a very tough situation to be a governor of any state at this point. So I would say, I would encourage anyone to certainly offer their prayers up for Governor Hochul and her family. I would say the public safety issue, the issue of public safety. There are a number of folks in Albany who really want to and have tried to dismantle the public safety infrastructure of our state. They believe that police are bad, and they are very focused on protecting or giving additional privileges, rights, whatever, to criminals. And I think that can be very dangerous, and I think it's causing a lot of problems in our streets across our state. So I think that issue, praying for our law enforcement, but also praying that people in Albany will temper their extremes, to try to find real solutions. Defunding the police is not a serious policy solution. It might sound good on Twitter, but it doesn't really address even the issues that are going on. Okay, so there's your concern with police brutality. Okay, well, getting rid of all the cops means you're going to have criminal brutality. You've just traded one set of bad things for another. You haven't solved anything. And so I think we have to get back to this notion that we're here to solve problems and to first do no harm. And so I think the law enforcement, public safety, and then just third, I would say, and not for this group's benefit, but our businesses. We have small businesses across this state who every night they go to bed, they don't know if their business will be in business a year from now. They don't know if they'll have their employees a year from now. And every time an employer goes out and employees get laid off, that is bad for our economy. It's bad for the state. And there's a lot of variables right now that make that even more harrowing to be a small business owner. So I really think and by the way, the state of New York has never been overly friendly to business, as all of you know. So that's not a new thing, but it hasn't gotten better. But I think those three things, I think, are probably the most pressing items to pray for that I can think of at the moment.
Very good. Thank you. The last question, you sort of answered it already. What is the biggest issue regarding businesses that we need to be aware of?
Well, actually, I'll tell you I will tell you a very specific one. It's called the New York Heroes Act. It is a terrible. Now, it sounds nice, right? The New York Heroes Act sounds like it would be a great piece of legislation. I can assure you it is anything but. This legislation was passed, like so many things, in response to COVID. But what it does is it makes businesses, now it may not affect all of you on this call because I do think there's an employee threshold. So I think it's for people that have more employees, I believe, but parts of it may affect you. But basically it makes you responsible for any airborne virus that your employees may get from being at work. I mean, we read this bill and it was so bad and nobody was talking about it, right? Because it's kind of like, again, there's always more workers than there are business owners. And of course, there's fewer business owners every day in New York because we chase them out of here. But this is a bad piece of legislation that I believe is going to open up businesses, manufacturers to additional liability, lawsuits. And for what? Because people came to work. I mean, for how many years have we been going to work and you get a cold at work, you get the flu at work, you get whatever at work, but you don't make the business owner. I mean, now obviously we all know there's negligence, right? You have to do what you can to mitigate risk as a employer, but the notion that you can abolish it, you can wipe out any risk. And what's the real goal? It's twofold. One, it's to keep people at home because for some reason, the Democrats, I believe, they want people at home. They want you at home dependent on the government. It's bizarre. But the other thing is, and these guys always seem to get what they want in Albany. And if somebody knows one on the call, I apologize in advance, but trial lawyers always seem to do well in Albany, no matter who's in charge, no matter what decade it is, pandemic or no pandemic, they do well. So, and this is going to be a boon for the trial lawyers, no question about it, because someone's going to say, I got COVID from going to work at this facility, and I'm going to sue my boss because he should have stopped it from happening. And he made me come in. He said I had to go to work that day. And that's a real law. I mean, I'm not making this up. This isn't hyperbole. It was signed into law by Governor Cuomo. It was passed by the Senate and the Assembly. And we can give you more information on that law. Now, there's a number of other issues facing businesses in New York. I don't want to make it sound like it's just one. But that, I think, that is a terrible, terrible bill that no one's talking about. And it's a devastating bill for business in New York.
The machine rolls on.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Quickly, is that a law or is that a bill, Senator? Is
That
that
is
already
law.
a law or is it a bill?
That is law. That was signed into law. So yeah, that is. I don't know. We can get you the effective date. Alex, I'll have Alex, Bob. I'll have him send a copy of the bill to you, and you can distribute it to this group.
Very good. Very good. I appreciate that very much. All right, that is the last question that we have. So I'm going to turn it over to Deborah and ask her to kind of close us off here. Thank you again, Senator Ort, and
Thank
to
you
your
all for
office
having
as well for helping to coordinate your presence here tonight.
Oh, thank you, Senator, and thank you for serving in the service. We appreciate that so much. It was a great evening tonight, and what we want to bring to you now, those people who are listening now or later, is that we are a work in progress. We need your feedback of how this meeting went. We need to hear from you what you need as a business partner, as a Christian. We want to come together in our meetings. And the next one that Linda talked about is in October 16th, where we're going to come together and we want to really strengthen a collaborative group to pool our resources together, to pray together so we may still thrive and stay in business in Western New York. That is really important for us. It's a work in progress, but I love whiteboards and we can pray and see what God wants to do with us. And that is going to be on September 16th, Saturday from 9 to 12, 995 Dodge Road in Amherst, or in Gettsville. And then before that, we're going to have another forum like this, a Zoom meeting on October 18th. So please, maybe Bob can put that in our chat. What you would do is go to christianbusinessboard.com and you can register there for October 16th and get more information about October 18th. We're looking for people also to give testimonies, positive testimonies of how they've been able to stay in business through this. And I think we can all talk about what's not working, but we want to talk about what is working. And so that event will be really important that if you feel like you can contribute, share, come, and we will give you that platform. And then we'll see where it goes from there. There will be some refreshments that day. And if you want to email us at info@christianbusinessboard.com, we'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to close this in prayer. Bob, is there anything else I'm missing?
No, I don't think so. I just posted the contact information in the chat and would ask people to reach out to us. If you want to register for that event on the 16th, send an email to info@christianbusinessboard.com and I will send you more information as it develops.
Thank you. You know, Christian Business Board has been such a blessing to me, starting a very small business, but just the encouragement of being together is it's just a blessing. It really is. We are in this together. So God, we just come to you tonight. We thank you for Senator Ortt and everything he has done. We ask that you would strengthen him. And I ask you, God, that you would make a way for businesses to prosper in New York. As we heard tonight, greater is he that is us than he that is in the world. Bless everyone who's on the call and those who will be listening. And we give you praise and glory for this state, for what you desire to do and bring movement by your spirit. And we just do. We give you glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Hope to see you next month.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.